Alright. Welcome to Web 411, session 6. So, this slide pack is brought to you by somebody else, not me. So, we'll be looking at the array and functions in Java. Now, again, as we've done C# and that lovely Python, there shouldn't be any surprises in how you define arrays and display them. They're pretty much the same. So each location in the array has an index value, and index start at 0. So to store or to access a particular location, you give the array name and the index location value, and then you insert the value you want to be stored. So nothing exciting there. It's pretty much standard with what we saw in C#. And Python, we call this a list. So we can do a prompt looping through to get the user to provide the value with this little routine. So if I is 0 and I is less than n, then we will add I to I. So in other words, add 1, increment by 1. And then the JavaScript for the array, we're doing car name, so it's auto, and then I for the index value. And then we're going to prompt for input. So we did this in other methods, but this one we're doing it in JavaScript. So again, running through basic scenario that we've seen before. Fill the array with 10 cars. These elements will be indexed from 0 to 9, and you'll have the various manufacturers or models stored. How you would display it would be via the document write command, and then the output parameters would be the array name, index location, and depending on if you want a single line per, depends on whether you use the break symbol to do the carriage return and start a new line. Then putting that into a for loop for the length of the array. Now you can see here we have a I for a variable counting the index locations, and we've got an array length. So that's a bit more robust in that the length can vary, and our script will adjust to the length. So auto length will give it the number of elements within the array, as we add and subtract, modify the arrays, the number of elements can change. So having your loop reference the number of elements automatically makes it more flexible and more robust to changes. The array sort method is putting your information in a ascending order and allows you to display them in that order. So, as I said to you earlier, we're going to go through and do basically the same activities we did with C#, but in this new language. So you need to create an array of cars. You need to prompt the user for how many cars they want to record and prompt them for the cars that they're storing, and then display the list of cars on the screen. And just to make it interesting, we'll put it in ascending order. So expanding on that, we want to record more information about each vehicle. So we've got the make, model, year and colour. So again, expand your questions of your user to input those values, and we need to display it in a table. So nothing rocket science. So they're the activities that we'll be working on in the assignment phase of this afternoon. Should keep you occupied for a little while. Okay, so we know functions can be written in JavaScript, and yesterday the question was asked whether we can call JavaScripts in like we do a CSS file, and yes, we can was the answer to that. So I'll leave it up to you when you're writing these activities, the codes, whether you want to store the actual JavaScripts in a separate file and import them in as part of the header information like you do a CSS file, or whether you want to define the functions in the header and then call them inside your HTML code with the script tags. Totally up to you how you want to do it. So back to the functions. We call them when we need them, and the parameters need to be specified that match the parameters set for the function. So if you have 3 defined, then you need to provide the 3. And going back to yesterday's example, straight function, say hello, we have a parameter called name1. So when we call it, we need to provide at least one parameter there. So That's how we call it within the script tag. Say hello, name. The name is the parameter that we've got to fulfill. So a possible solution to embedding this into your HTML is in the header, define the function, and then you call the function in the body and provide a variable for the name. Still within the script tags, because it's got to know to step out of HTML and run the JavaScript. So we can modify the function for it to prompt the name and put it in as a variable, and then execute it to fill in the body just like we did before. So that's the expanded function. So now we're prompting the name and running the print function. So they're defined as functions at the top and then executed in the body. So standard principle, you've got to define the function before you can execute it. So nothing new in the concepts of how these work. All what you've got to remember is the new syntax. It's not that much different from the C# that we did, and getting your brackets right. Just remember which language you're using. So the third activity for today are to create functions to execute the car array activity. So define your scripts for the first one, and then the third activity is to go through and use functions and then call those functions or execute the functions in the body. Again, just practice the language using the activities to give you a scenario to program towards a goal. Alright, so we're building up on the programming skills using the same scenarios that we did with C#, but we're using it in web-based and JavaScript. And that basically brings us to the conclusion of today. So it's just introduction to refresh you in the way arrays work and setting up the functions so that they can be called within the body.